任せておく。
勝負だ真田山、決着をつけようぜ。
この時を待っていた。いざ尋常に勝負。
Hello everybody and welcome to this video looking at Kill la Kill, the latest anime franchise tie-in fighting game. Comes to us from Arc System Works, who doesn't generally put a foot wrong with this kind of thing, and they haven't done so here either. This is a very good little fighting game indeed, and that will come as a great deal of relief for the Kill la Kill fans out there who have been waiting a long time for their anime to get a video game, and it's good that it has been worth the while. I'm glad that the fans of this series can enjoy this one, because like I said, it is a good quality one. It could have turned out all kinds of wrong, but it didn't, so good on the developers for that. As you can see, this is a arena based fighting game, and if you look at it and immediately have concerns that it would be like those pretty terrible Jumpstar ones that Spike Chunsoft keeps churning out, unfortunately, given how talented Spike Chunsoft usually is, you would not be alone. I actually had very similar concerns when I first loaded this thing up and started playing it. I actually went into this quite fresh. I haven't really been following the development of this game. I didn't really know too much about it. So when I saw that it was an arena fighting game and looked superficially similar to Jumpstars and the Dragon Ball Z ones and all that kind of stuff, I was concerned, I must admit. I didn't think I'd enjoy this one as much as I have. I'm not very good at this kind of game either, which is always a off-putting start. I much prefer my fighters to be either 2D or like Dead or Alive or Tekken, and I've never really been able to get along with the way that these kind of arena games work. But I found this one very enjoyable, and the reason I found it very enjoyable is its sense of style. This game really nails the anime to a T and does a really good job of capturing all that energy, which in what is actually a very energetic anime at all times. As anybody who has watched Kill la Kill will tell you, there is one thing that this game does not lack for, and that is energy. So congratulations to the developers for getting that. That can't have been easy either, and they've done a really good job of that here. This is a very authentic anime game, in other words. One thing that is very noteworthy about this one, and something I actually really approve of the developers, is how limited the roster is. There are only 10 characters from memory, of which only 8 are available from the outset. And while that sounds like a very small roster, I mean, compared to Smash Brothers where there's like 700 of them, or even Dead or Alive and Tekken and Street Fighter and all those games, they all have very expensive rosters now. To only have 10 feels like it is a limited game as a result. But actually, it really works to this game's benefit because each of those characters has a very distinctive fighting style, and the balance between them is really good. Again, I'm not very good at this game, so I find myself losing to even the lowest level of AI. But there are definitely matchups where I feel like there is a slight advantage to one side, only for the game to then really encourage me to want to overcome that advantage, and none of the characters feels completely overpowered. There feels like there's some advantages and disadvantages depending on which character you're using, but it doesn't feel like you're ever out of the fight, which is great. There are definitely other fighting games out there where the balance is that difficult because the rosters are so bloated that there is definitely a kind of tiered system, and when you're on Twitter and whatever, for any popular fighting game you see this ridiculous tiering thing where you're meant to pick your favourite characters based on how good they are and all that kind of nonsense. That doesn't really apply to this game because every character is different but feels like they're in the fight really. Because of that, you can just pick the character that you're most interested in or the character that you like the most, and that's a good thing. And I wish more fighting games went for a smaller roster but did it in a way like this, where every character feels like it's viable and you can just choose your character purely on whichever one you like the most. Unfortunately, I can't show any of the story of this game because that's all locked behind footage blockers, and use the PlayStation 4's default footage capture software to capture these videos, but it is a good story as well. It blends some elements from the anime itself with a lot of original storytelling as well, and for fans of the characters and the anime itself, this will be a continuation of the story that will really appeal to them. For people who are not necessarily fans of Kill la Kill, a lot of the story is going to go way over their heads, and I guess that's to be expected. This is an anime tie-in game rather than a game to introduce people to the anime. But at the same time, the characters are distinctive enough and interesting enough that you can still enjoy the energy and the kind of the punky, grindhousey kind of aesthetics and style of this game, whether you necessarily follow every element of the story or not. It's quite an expansive story, and you are meant to spend a lot of time in the story because, like I said, there are only 10 characters out for multiplayer, and it is a relatively limited game in that respect, so the developers have put a lot of effort into the story to really compensate for that and make you feel like you're getting your money's worth and all that kind of stuff. So definitely spend time in the story once you get into this game, because that's, I guess, the main mode, and that's unusual for fighting games, though. You usually make the story side of things so important. In terms of the combat itself, once you get fighting, it's rather simple in theory to play. There's a light attack, a ranged attack, a break attack if your opponent's guarding, a guard button, and then a couple of supers which tie into those basic commands. There's also some aerials that you can do if you jump in the air, and your character is quite mobile, so a lot of the game is kind of dodging around your opponent, looking for a weakness and then really hitting them hard. And like I've said a couple of times in the video, I'm not particularly good at this kind of game, but it's very free-flowing, it's very fast, and while it's not a kind of Twitch game by any means, there's a lot of strategy that you need to apply in order to really beat these enemies and get over their strengths and compensate for your character's weaknesses. While it is very fast and very Twitch-based, it's also very strategic and very technical. It feels like really mastering each character is a process, because each character is very different, and that process is a good learning curve. It's immediately accessible because there aren't those huge combos to learn that most fighting games have, but at the same time there's an actual technique to using the character in fighting, which is really appealing and will hook people, I think, for quite a while. It is something that will keep people coming back for plenty of time to come. What also helps the accessibility of the game is the style of it, the cinematic nature of the combat. What I really enjoyed was a very simple element, but whoever's kind of leading the attack at the time is the focus of the camera. So if you landed the last major hit, the camera sits behind you and follows you as you move around the battlefield, while your opponent is kind of off in the distance with the camera. From the camera. Whereas if your opponent does hit you, as you would have seen just here in the clip in front of you right now, the camera shifts to be behind them. And while that isn't ideal for playability, it's actually quite hard to control your character to a finite degree when they're so far away from the camera itself. That is a very cinematic, very stylish element, and it helps to differentiate the game and helps to give it energy and helps to create that kind of ebb and flow feel of the fighting, which is very characteristic of Kill la Kill, where a character will get the upper hand for a while before something happens, and then they'll be absorbing the blows a bit before again getting the upper hand. So that kind of ebb and flow of the combat is created really well through the use of the camera in this game, and that is a dynamic we don't see in many fighting games. Most of the time the fighting games try to keep a very neutral camera, so that it doesn't feel like it's ever unfair to either of the characters or players. This one is more interested in being that kind of cinematic single player experience, so it takes a little bit more liberties with the camera and is willing to, I guess, be a little bit less playable in return, in order to create that atmosphere and the aesthetic that it's looking for. As for the arenas themselves, they'll be very familiar to anybody who knows Kill la Kill. They'll be very appealing to anybody who doesn't know Kill la Kill but is playing the game for whatever reason. They're pretty easy to understand arenas, and they're fairly small in order to encourage action. There's nowhere to really hide from the fight when you're in one of these arenas, but they are visually appealing. They're a little bit static, I guess. I'm a bit of a fan of stuff like BlazBlue and other fighting games where there's a lot of kind of energy happening in the background and there's a bit of a story created through the backgrounds themselves. This one is much more static, but it's colourful, it's bright. Again, it fits with the anime, and because the action of the game itself is so fast, you don't really have a time to pay attention to the backgrounds anyway until you're recording a video and talking about the game. Then you realise it's a little bit static, but it works for the context of the game itself. So really, as with any anime tie-in, Kill la Kill isn't essential, but it is a very high quality fighting game, and while it won't necessarily pull in people who are new to the franchise. I don't think it's the game that will introduce people to Kill la Kill. For existing fans, I would say that this one's pretty much essential. I don't think you could hope for a better fighting game or a better game to do this series justice. So I think Arc System Works has done a very good job. I think this is a very good fighting game, and I think that fans will absolutely love it. So thanks very much for tuning into the video. As always, please do back me on Patreon if you enjoy what I do. It helps me a great deal, and you get visual novels as a result of it now. Go and check my Patreon out for all the details there. And otherwise, we will see you at the next video. Thank you.